In 1960, 9 experienced Russian hikers went into the northern Ural Mountains. And within days, all 9 of them were dead. But there's a catch. Their tent was found slashed from the inside. Most of their bodies had no clothes on. And when investigators arrived at the scene, they found some strange things, like ski tracks that didn't belong to any of the hikers and human footprints near their tent. But there was no sign of a struggle. It wasn't a bear. So, who did this? The answer might shock you. Welcome back, everyone. Here today, we're going to be taking a look at one of the most well-known and solved mysteries of the 20th century, the Dyatlov Pass incident. I want to start off by saying that I know a lot of you are familiar with this case, but hear me out because we're going to go over a lot of new details. Some of these even suggest that the most popular theories about the Dyatlov incident might be completely wrong. Let's begin. On February 1960, 9 members of the Ural Polytechnic Institute Ski Club left the small village of Ivdel for a skiing trip in the northern Urals. The group consisted of 3 couples and 3 single men. They were all experienced skiers and outdoor enthusiasts. Yuri was the leader of the group. He was 38 years old and an experienced hiker. The group planned to hike up Otorten Mountain, which is 1,491 meters high. At first, they took a train from Moscow to Yekaterinburg, and then they took a truck to the village of Ivdel. When they arrived in Ivdel, they started their journey through the thick snowdrifts. When the group got closer to the mountain, they decided to set up camp in a small clearing in the forest. In their tent, they had food, water, and warm clothing. But after only a few hours at the campsite, their tent was cut open from the inside, and the hikers fled into the forest without taking their belongings with them. A few hours later, searchers found their abandoned equipment in the snow. They also found their half-eaten dinner still sitting on the table next to their tent. There was no sign of a struggle, and the ropes that secured the tent to the ground were intact. 3 days later, on February 2nd, the first bodies were discovered. 3 people were found frozen on the side of a hill near the tent. One of the men was partially clothed, and another man's trousers were unbuttoned, and his underwear was missing. 2 women were lying face down in the snow. It appeared as if they had been trying to get back to the tent. All 9 bodies were found. 4 of them were found together near the tent, and 5 others were found 1 kilometer away on the slope of a hill. Some of the hikers had serious injuries, including a split in the back of one man's head and 2 other men with jawbone fractures. It was clear that whoever attacked the hikers did not do so gently. But why? Investigators arrived at the scene and began their investigation. They initially assumed that the hikers had perished in an avalanche. However, there was no evidence of an avalanche, and the tent would have been destroyed had that happened. Investigators then considered the possibility of hypothermia, but all of the hikers were found with their sleeping bags intact. The only explanation for the tent being cut open from the inside seemed to be an animal attack. But when investigators arrived at the scene, they found something strange. A strange gas cylinder was found near the tent, suggesting that someone had been camping nearby. Furthermore, several witnesses came forward claiming to have seen strange lights and heard explosions in the area around the time of the incident. This led investigators to believe that a military vehicle must have crashed near the tent, causing the hikers to flee in terror. The tent was torn apart by animals who were scavenging for food. Some of the hikers died in the struggle to escape the forest, while others were killed outright by the military vehicle. This theory gained some traction, especially when investigators found ski tracks near the tent. These tracks belonged to a Soviet Army unit stationed nearby. But as the investigation continued, more and more pieces of evidence pointed to a much darker conclusion. Forensics experts examined the bodies and found that most of the hikers had no alcohol or drugs in their systems. The only exception was one woman who had traces of morphine in her system. Clearly, she had taken the drug before she died. But what does this mean? Well, it suggests that the hikers were not suffering from drug-induced psychosis when they fled their tent. If they had been, they would have been unable to properly assess the danger they were in and would have been unlikely to survive the ordeal. Not only that, but the condition of the bodies was also strange. Several of the hikers had no clothes on and some were only wearing one shoe. Others had their shoelaces untied. So, why did the hikers flee into the snowy wilderness in the middle of the night? What could have been so terrifying that caused them to abandon their warm sleeping bags in such a desperate manner? Was it an animal attack? We know now that it was not a bear. Bears usually drag their victims into the forest and eat them, but these bodies were found close to the tent. So maybe it was a wolf pack. But again, wolf attacks are brutal and bloody. And these bodies were almost pristine. Could it have been something supernatural, like a monster? Maybe. But is there any proof that monsters exist? Unfortunately, no. So here's what we have so far. Experienced hikers abandoned their tents in the middle of the night. They fled into the freezing cold with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Some of them were injured, but they still managed to travel 1 kilometer to the slope of a hill where they collapsed and died. There was no sign of a struggle and no evidence of an animal attack. Even the most popular theory of a military vehicle accident has been disproven by forensic evidence. So what really happened to these 9 hikers? One of the main reasons why this case has remained unsolved for so long is that many of the crucial pieces of evidence were mishandled. For example, the gas cylinder was never tested, which could have provided valuable insights into the identity of the hiker's mysterious assailant. Additionally, the autopsy reports were incomplete and did not include toxicology reports for all of the hikers. Despite these setbacks, the case was eventually classified as unknown. But one man refused to accept this conclusion. Vladimir Markov was a Soviet criminologist who was brought in to consult on the case. He became convinced that the official story was not true and that a cover-up was underway. Why? Well, he believed that the case was far from ordinary. He believed that the events at Dyatlov Pass were the result of a secret government experiment gone awry. According to his theory, the hikers stumbled upon a secret military base while hiking in the forest. They were then captured and used as test subjects for a top-secret government experiment. But something went wrong and the hikers managed to escape. In the ensuing panic, they were killed and their bodies were mutilated in order to cover up the crime. Despite his controversial theory, Markov was eventually vindicated. In 1990, the case was reopened and new evidence was uncovered. This included eyewitness accounts of strange lights and sounds in the sky as well as strange footprints near the tent. The footprints were eventually identified as belonging to a Soviet army unit. This supported Markov's theory that the hikers had stumbled upon a secret military base. However, despite this new evidence, the case remains unsolved to this day. What do you think happened at Dyatlov Pass? Do you think that Vladimir Markov was right and that this was a case of government conspiracy? Or do you believe that there is a more natural explanation for these events, perhaps something related to the terrain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to stay tuned for more content. Thanks for watching.